Hello, and thank you for tuning into the MSR Forefront. I'm Stefanetta Harmon. This edition marks the kickoff of an ongoing series spotlighting the intersection of 38th and Chicago and South Minneapolis, the corner where Goerge Floyd was killed by police in May. Corridor that currently serves as a memorial, shut off the street traffic, but has effectively become a ground zero in our national and global conversations around racial justice, police brutality, and systemic racism. It's also a symbol of hope, potential for change, with communities organizing, calls for elected officials, opportunities for implementing strategies that actually speak, support, and change community. But change isn't going to happen overnight, and it won't happen without transparency and participation from all sides. So we are collectively connecting with communities, organizers, elected officials to share their stories, their perspective on that corridor, and how they hope that it impacts and highlights change throughout the city and the state of Minnesota. Tonight, we'll be speaking with Andrea Jenkins, Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council, about the city's plans and positioning around the space. I'm so happy to have you on this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you
You're
doing?
welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so today we're really talking about, 38th Street, Chicago Avenue in South Minneapolis, the place of, where George Floyd was killed. And there's so much going on in that space in terms of community activism, protest, and a lot of pain. And so a lot of pain right now. It's ground zero for what sparked pretty much a revolution across the country and across the globe. And I know now folks are talking about reopening and then businesses being impacted. And I just kind of wanted to get a sense from you right now about what does that mean? One, just to even be able to have it renamed to George Perry Floyd Jr.'s place. And then how do we look at taking this from a place of pain and protest to a piece of our healing and symbol for change?
Sure.
Yeah.
It is really a very, like you said, emotional space right now. I have literally been working to revitalize the intersection of 38th and Chicago, and as you noted, we just recently renamed the street to honor and memorialize the life of George Perry Floyd to George Perry Floyd Jr. Place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I've been working at this intersection for the past 20 years because it has been a very challenged part of our community for a very long time. There was a history of Cup Foods, which was at the center of this whole situation with George Floyd. I mean, that's the store that he, purchased some cigarettes. And, one of the things that's really interesting to me, Stefanetta, is that, Eric Garner died around commercial tobacco, Newports. He was selling Lucy's and made the statement that he couldn't breathe. I can't breathe. And then George Floyd purchasing some Newport, some commercial tobacco, and then subsequently making that exact same statement, I can't breathe. And it just really talks about the systemic racism that is in our culture and society that has Black people addicted to nicotine, that criminalizes all of our activities, including the mere act of purchasing cigarettes. I mean, that has become now criminal in the eyes of law enforcement. And so I think that incident brought up all of this pain for Black folks. Combine that with the coronavirus that has deeply impacted Black and Brown communities, and the unemployment that comes with that. The people who are working in, quote, essential jobs that put their lives at risk. And there seems to be no real concern for those communities. Our young people aren't in school. And so all of these things are really, I think, combined to bring about this global reckoning that you talked about in support of Black lives. What's happening at this intersection, in many respects, is so beautiful to see. All of the art that has sprung up, the impromptu gardens that have emerged in the space to bring life to the space. I mean, you know, daily people from all over the city, all over the state, all over the world are bringing flowers and teddy bears and things to the space. And I think that prompted many community members to create gardens. So there's literally
Gardens on gardens on
gardens on gardens growing,
yes.
Flowers growing, food growing in this space, and absolutely bringing life into this space that has really not only symbolized, you know, I mean, it literally took George Floyd's life, but I think it symbolized death for many other people as well. So I'm just amazed by the energy that is out there at the intersection that has been barricaded off by the city in sort of collaboration with the community. And it has been closed off since, you know,
It's Memorial Weekend.
Yeah, since Memorial Day, because people just started flooding that area. And we didn't want people to get hurt with cars driving into them. You know, and during the riots, I mean, there were really deep and real concerns about people driving through protesters with their cars, trucks and all of those kinds of things. So we put up the barricades, and that was almost 4 months ago now.
Right. And now it's like ground zero. It's pretty much ground zero, not just even for like the civil unrest piece that kicked off in May or the end, you know, early June, but now it's like ground zero in this never forget.
Yes.
Yes.
It's ground zero, like 9/11, where, you know, in lower Manhattan, where people still gather to this day, 19 years later, to memorialize and understand and recognize and appreciate what happened that day. And it's the same here in at 38th and George Perry Floyd
Jr., right? All of that.
Long name.
The full name. And it's also, now we're at this place of a now what? We've got this renaming, right? We know the cities are paying attention. I know there was some talks a couple months ago about reopening, and that was shut down. But so now looking that you've got a renaming that passed easily with the,
that was
city council. Right.
And that's just the beginning. That, you know, I look at that as something that absolutely had to happen. It is only the beginning of a process to reimagine and rededicate the city to investing in this community. We need jobs. We need home ownership opportunities for people. We need business development in this corridor. And I, as the city council member representing this area, am 100% committed to making those things happen. Prior to George Floyd's deeply untimely and tragic end of his life, we had been working on redeveloping this corridor since I first took office. It is the #1 priority on my agenda.
Okay.
It has been for the past 3 years. And one of the things that I talked about, the centerpiece, is to have a center for racial healing. This wound that the murder of George Floyd opened up, it is not new. We've been struggling as a community for decades, for
Yes.
centuries, some people may say. And so, you know, I recognize that we must have this space to mourn, to heal, to learn about what it takes to become anti-racist, what it takes to become aware of the trauma that the African American community is dealing with, and a place where we as African Americans can go and heal physically, emotionally, economically, spiritually. We need all of those things at this intersection.
Do you see that happening in that space between 37th and 39th in that area, or is it somewhere else that you see something like that being built or created?
I see it happening within that space, but reverberating along 38th Street. 38th Street has historically been a center for African American business. So yes, beyond just 38th in Chicago, has to go extend along 38th Street corridor.
I was just really thinking about the actual center that you're talking about building. Like, do you see that being placed there in that,
I
in
do.
that area?
Absolutely. I do.
Is that something that the city is behind, or is this something that you are personally having to push forward at this moment?
It's been my personal mission, and I have been able to bring the city into this dialogue again. Prior to George Floyd being
right.
So the city will absolutely be a partner in whatever the community believes we need to move forward. And the community is very much about a museum, a center, some type of physical space that people can come to mourn, to heal, to learn, to
get
empower, inspire, and all of those things. And it should happen at that intersection. So yes.
That would be amazing. What are some short-term, because I know that's a long-term, larger project. What are some short-term things that the city has looked at or is exploring to move forward, maybe over the next 6 months?
Over the next 6 months. So we've already, during this summer, we created what we call cultural corridors, and 38th Street is designated as a cultural corridor, which means it brings resources around economic development, around business support to the area. So that has been instituted. Within the next 6 months, I want to expand a African American company that is training young Black men and women on how to create and manufacture and install solar panels. We want to expand that program to the south side, to this area, to 38th Street, to bring sustainable jobs and well-paying jobs to the community. So that will happen within the next 6 months. We have committed $300,000 to support artists in the community to help us imagine what these plan for what a center will look like, what kinds of economic development will happen in this corridor, So that's immediate. That has already been done. We're just really now trying to get those dollars into the hands of artists and healers and community members, organizers, to be able to begin that process of defining what this corridor will look like. We have a project that the mayor has initiated called Minneapolis Forward that will be raising money for small and people of color owned businesses all throughout the city. But the 38th Street corridor has been prioritized within that process. And so there will be immediate resources brought to this community that will center Blackness, that will center people of color entrepreneurs in order to become more successful and more engaged in ownership opportunities within this community. So immediate, mid-range, and long-term goals to support this community are in place. And that's the message that I really want the community that is, rightfully holding down this space, because they don't want, and I don't want this to happen either, they don't want things to just go back to normal.
Right, we can't ever go back.
We can't go back to normal. We've known this since the coronavirus hit, that it uncovered the deep imbalance in our culture and society that has Black and brown people at the bottom of our society. And we knew going into this, we can't go back to normal. It has to be dedicated, intentional plans to create a brighter future for Black and brown people in our communities. And 38th in Chicago, 38th at George Perry Floyd Jr. Place. To get it down.
Right.
Is priority one in my mind.
Thinking about that, I know that like there's great plans now, because at least there are plans at this point, and that there's movement forward and people are seeing the hopeful side of this. We also know that little area, got some crime, got some problems. And then you're also facing the city is facing pending lawsuits from some business over there, just, in terms of loss of foot traffic. What are those are some of the challenges. What are some ways to maybe that addressing in a way that does not also still hurt us?
That is really the crux of the challenge here is, what are the right and appropriate steps to take to assure the community that we absolutely have the best interests of the community at heart. And when I say have the best interests, like, I live here. This is my neighborhood. It's not like I'm trying to make some plans for some other part of town that I have nothing to do with. This is where I live. I have invested in this community for the past 22 years as a homeowner, as a activist, as a organizer, as a staff person, and now as an elected official. So this is my community, and there's no way I'm gonna give up on the fight to reinvest in this community. The crime is a really deep and big concern for the area. The loss of business, is a really deep concern. I mentioned the Minneapolis Forward program, which is raising money to be able to support some of these businesses. So we hope to be able to get some dollars into these businesses sooner rather than later, to be able to to support that loss of business. But we know reopening the streets, I believe, will help to address some of the crime issues, because I think right now there's a sense that, this is a safe space for criminals to operate, because, it's barricaded off. The police don't have full access to be able to be a part of helping to control and patrol the area. And what we've done in the meantime is to help empower and support some community-based solutions to that are on the ground, like Agape, which is a community-based group that consists of some of their members have been involved in the life of gay culture, and have experience with some of these young people, and able to help bring some sense of calm. We've invested in the Office of Violence Prevention that is involved in supporting community-based solutions to some of the crime in the area. However, it is a challenge. I mean, and until we can get people back to school, back to work, all of these things, which is being complicated by the coronavirus, it's going to continue to be a challenge. Because what I don't want to happen, Stefanetta, is like some militarized police force come in and take control. That is not the answer in my mind. And that is only going to lead to more turmoil, more pain, more harm to our communities. And so we're really trying to work with these community-based solutions, as well as really trying to meet the real needs and concerns of the community through investment and creativity, and addressing the harm that has been done. And so to that end, I am, we've declared racism as a public health crisis. Right. I was able to author that resolution and bring that forward, which passed unanimously. And then next week, we're going to embark on a truth and reconciliation process to really get to the heart of the matter, and talk about what are the harms that the city of Minneapolis has done to Black and Brown communities, and then what are the solutions to help us to begin a process of healing and to come through this on the other side.
I know you mentioned just a little bit ago about what, some of the reasons of opening, right? Like just to be able to get some throughway to be able to access the community. But I know some people are super against opening that space. What do you think or see could be a happy medium in that, or is there one at this point?
I think there can be. Some people have talked about, certainly I think people want a memorial there, and that's going to happen. That is not, yes. That absolutely is going to happen. One of the things about 38th and Chicago, and Chicago Avenue in particular, the Chicago Avenue bus route is one of the most populous routes in the entire state of Minnesota. The buses run like every 8 minutes, very frequent. It goes through 6 different communities, from Brooklyn Center all the way to the airport, Mall of America, Richfield. So it is one of the most critical bus routes in the state.
Mhm.
And we just got funding for what is known as BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, which
Mhm.
myself and the first African-American commissioner in Hennepin County, Angela Conley, we have been advocating for this bus route for the past 3 years because we know it's beneficial to our community. Most people who ride this bus, I would say 75% are people of color
Mhm.
who utilize this bus route.
That used to go right through where the memorial.
George Floyd, yes. I mean,
Yes,
literally, he
yes.
got murdered in the bus stop. So, so those buses have been rerouted around that area. So maybe it becomes a bus and pedestrian only space, and we reroute cars around that. I think that can be one possibility, one sort of middle ground, if you will, that
Mhm.
that
That keeps.
that community can get around, and that can really create the kind of openness so that businesses can continue to thrive, and bring some level of safety back to that area and to the broader city as well.
I know there's, always going to be some back and forth in the community about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, and we have an example of that. Nicollet Mall is a bus only,
Area.
pedestrian and bus only situation, and I think that could potentially work at Chicago
Okay.
Avenue.
Now, we talked about, what the city's doing and some of your goals and things that you've been working on, even pre-COVID, pre-George,
Yeah,
because the trauma's been present. We get that part.
for
Right.
real.
What are some things that we as community members, who are watching the conversations and watching the back and forth, because we got lives and everything, social media, we can see everything that's wrong, but how do we empower ourselves to get to this place of right? What can we do to support your efforts, to support the folks who are on the ground working for peace and preventing crime? What do we do at this point? Like, what can we step up and show up?
Sure. No, I think that's a really important question, Stephanie. We have to stay engaged in this, and people have to share their opinions and come to the table and help plan. I know for a fact that there are many community members and African American community members who live near and around and close to this area who are deeply concerned that they want to see these things reopened, but they are, people I think are feeling afraid and almost intimidated to speak their minds, and I think they have to. I think we as the city, and maybe myself included, have not been doing a good enough job at communicating what it is that we are wanting to do. And it's challenged because 38th in Chicago is a really significant and challenging problem. But because of the coronavirus, because of the uprisings, because of the riots, like there is so much work to do all around the city.
Right.
Our staff, and at the end of the day, people are still being impacted by the coronavirus. I mean, we're working from home. Um, Unfortunately, people are getting sick. I mean, people gotta heal. Um, we've had to institute furlough days at the city because we lost so much money during the pandemic, and
Right.
continue because people aren't going to Timberwolves games and Twins games and Vikings games and you know um, going to the theater downtown. We have a thriving theater market in Minneapolis, which rivals San Francisco and New York City, but that's all been shut down. And so we don't have that revenue. We're losing revenue. We got to try to make up for it some way. But you know, I, I'm about to re-engage a community imagining process, and I would just ask people to show up.
Okay.
You know, at the end of the day, Stefanetta, we gotta love each other. That's why I do this job, is because I love Black people. Um, and if we can't get to the love, to the heart, I'm not sure how we get through this. W- w- you know, we gotta trust each other. I feel like there's a sense of mistrust, and I get it, and then rightfully so. I mean, the culture of this city, of this country, has been, oh, just trust us, we'll take care of it, and what happens is we get left behind each and every time.
So we
Um,
really have to stay engaged, stay focused, and show up for you. Pretty much the things that we've been always saying, but we have to be more intentional, like
yeah,
voting.
we got to be more intentional. We got to show up for each other, and
Right,
and
right.
really um, try to understand all. Because right now it feels like people are just stuck in their own head, and I got to do this for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
think we got to be thinking about, how do we do this for all of us.
Mm. Yeah,
Don't know if that is
that's
helpful or not, but that's where I am.
okay. I think it is. I think it's very helpful that we sometimes just need a little push to make sure we can step out of where we are to move to someplace else. So thank you so much, Council Vice President, for this
You're very welcome.
conversation. You appreciate your time. I know I took a lot, so thank you
Well,
so much.
it's good. It's good. It's good. It's
Okay,
a very necessary and important conversation.
okay. But I see this as one part of an ongoing, continuing conversation with the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, representatives, elected officials like yourself, and the community, so that we can continue to share these snapshots and be able to bring these issues to the forefront in a way that's not always reactionary. Because there's a whole
Yeah,
lot of
no,
reactions that are going on, and I get that. But how do we move to a place where we can be proactive and keep pushing forward in the midst of this pain, in the midst of the protests, in the midst of a pandemic? So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, the one message I want to leave,
Mhm.
beyond the love, is um, everything that the community is hoping for and desiring and fighting for.
Mhm.
I am 100% fighting for those exact same things.
Awesome.
I am absolutely a part of this community too. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Into this, thank you for tuning into this edition of the MSR Forefront. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, that you learned something new, were inspired to do something bigger today than you did yesterday, or were just impacted enough to share. Because that's what this is all about. MSR Forefront with the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, where we look to bring issues to the forefront that impact Black Minnesotans and beyond. Thank you.